are the catalysts of change. Without us, there is no change.
When I was a graduate student, one of the odd jobs that I had was that I drove a truck delivering imported Swiss grape juice. And one of the places that I delivered it to was the Metropolitan Opera. And I still have this wonderful memory of being on the stage elevator, bringing my load up, and they stopped to move some properties in and out. And I got to walk out onto the stage of the Metropolitan Opera and imagine that I was singing an aria. I've been teaching in this building since it opened. From the day that it opened, I've never spoken from this stage before. So I'm reminded of that story, feeling a degree of completion. I just agreed to serve as a consultant and an expert witness in a homicide case in Florida. The case is of a Vietnam veteran, a fellow my age, who is 100% disability rated and who killed the policeman in a blackout. And in Florida, killing a policeman is absolute death sentence. Although we just found out yesterday in the Parkland case that apparently if just one juror objects to the death sentence, then they don't kill him, they put him life in prison. And the reason I'm doing this is at least to get this man off of the death penalty. So what I want to talk to you about is how something so far away as the mid-1960s, the Vietnam War, is still shaping people's lives today. And I know that because of what I live with every day. Personally, I have a 70% disability rating for post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm also an anthropologist. I've spent my career studying small-scale societies, trying to understand the various factors that shape people's lives. And so last year I published a book, War and the Arc of Human Experience. I'm not supposed to plug it. My name's Glenn Petersen and it's online. War and the Arc of Human Experience. And my book is an anthropologist's attempt to understand the social conditions, the social forces that send young men like me, who enlisted in the military at age 17, and how the reasons that I enlisted, the eagerness, the willingness with which I went to war, how that shaped the way that I experienced the war, and how the ways that I personally experienced the war then shaped the rest of my life. And I was found and asked to be part of this case because I could talk to this context of young men going into the military, going to war, and coming back. I'm guessing that most of you understand that this is a huge problem in the present. I don't know if there are any veterans of our recent wars in here, but I have a hunch that almost everybody in this room knows a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan. We hear all the time about the high rate of post-traumatic stress in this war. It's my belief, based on what I've seen, that we ain't seen nothing yet, that it's going to keep rising and rising, exploding. That's what happened to me. It wasn't until I was back decades after the war that I began to understand that something happened to me. I teach here. I've been teaching here at Baruch for 46 years, at the City University for 50 years now. I teach in the PhD program and the master's program, but the fact is my preference is to teach undergraduates. And I teach particularly in the first year student. I really like to work with students just coming in. And so I've had an awful lot of experience over the past decades with 18-year-olds. And I look at them, and I think that's how old I was when I went to war. When I was 19, I was in combat in Vietnam, flying off an aircraft carrier. This is my plane about to take off to fly off the coast of North Vietnam. At 19 years old, I was not only in control, telling my pilot where to go, but I had 6 other aircraft under my control. It was my job to guard the fleet. It was my job to direct bombing attacks. It was my job to find downed pilots. I can't even comprehend how I could do it at that age based on my experience with my undergraduates here. I had no idea of what kind of burden that I was bearing. And I look back now and I say, I had no idea what was going on. And it wasn't just the responsibility that I had. It was working in really dangerous things and flying in dangerous missions. And as I grew older, it's also the guilt that I feel for having played a part in killing at least 3 million Vietnamese. And I can't let that go. So just, this is not me, but it's somebody doing exactly my job. This is flying off the coast of North Vietnam in control of virtually everything on the surface and in the air, and making sure that nothing got from North Vietnam out to my fleet. And I was incredibly successful at it. And I need to stress that part of what I feel is this awareness of what I got out of doing this stuff at an early age, how much I learned, and how it allowed me to become the success that I am. I came back from the war. I was a high school dropout when I went. I got a college degree. I went to graduate school. I've been teaching here. I learned a lot of good stuff. But the good stuff that I learned in no way mitigates the problems that I came back with. And this is the last of these photographs. I look at this photograph and I see how proud I was. The admiral was just pinning a medal on me, Medal for Valor. And one of the biggest things that I live with every day is, how is it possible to feel guilt and pride about the same activities? I have never figured that out. But that's what I deal with on a day in and day out basis. And when I talk to my students who are veterans, I hear the same sort of thing. They're dealing with the same sort of thing. So what I want to convey to you is that what young people bring back from war is profoundly confusing. There is a sense of pride, and for many of us, there is this sense of guilt. And there is a term that is becoming more and more common in the field that is called moral injury, right? And that's what we're talking about here. Moral injury is that it's not just the fear, it's not just the trauma, it is the profound internal confusion that I carry with me. I spent my life as an anthropologist trying to atone for what I had done by finding little islands in the Pacific that were an American colony and working with them to end American colonial rule. And when they finally achieved independence, because I lived in their villages, I spoke their language, I understood what they were dealing with, but also because I was here in New York City, they appointed me to represent them at the United Nations. And in that moment that they asked me to do that, I thought, oh, at last, I have atoned, right? And I got to the UN and I started working, and I figured out that it didn't change anything for me. I was still living with the same kinds of issues. And so I have to find other ways to atone. But I'm incredibly fortunate because those skills that I learned, the success that I have, all this has allowed me to teach at this public university, teach students who I deeply, deeply admire and respect, and I can live with myself because of this. I look at other veterans who didn't come back with the skills that I came back with, who came back with other kinds of issues and have never figured out how to deal with that, right? And that's the last piece of this that I want to talk about, is that so much of our society's emphasis, speaking as an anthropologist, I talk about culture, so much of our culture has to deal with young men being told how glorious it is to go to war. I want you to think about that, right? I see it on the television, in football games, on wrestling matches. It's everywhere that to be a man, you need to be tough, to shake off the hurt. If you acknowledge when you come back that something's wrong with you, You start to believe there's something defective in you. There's something wrong with you. Why am I not tough? And so we have a nation full of men approaching middle age still walking around trying to deny all of this. And so I need you to think about how these wars that we've just been through, how we're going to see more, are forever wars, not just in the terms of the combat, but in terms of what the people who fight them bring home with them. Thank you.